Welcome back to Couture Construction. I'm your host, Andrew Denny, and this is Season 12, The Long Game. This season, we're focusing on what endures in design and construction. The most meaningful work is rarely fast. It isn't flashy, and it certainly isn't built on shortcuts. The best companies, the best craftsmen, the best operators are playing the long game. They think in decades. They value standards over speed. They understand that reputation compounds. And today's conversation sits right at the center of that idea. Joining me is Robert Pelletier, President and CEO of Pacific Hardwood. Robert is not only a leader in the hardwood industry, he's also a fellow podcast host, which makes this a rare kind of dialogue. Two operators, two industry lifers, two people who believe that slowing down long enough to ask better questions actually sharpens their work. We're not talking about product lines or sales strategies today. We're talking about something deeper. Why long-form conversation matters in the trades. Why nuance matters. Why listening well may be one of the most underrated competitive advantages in this industry. Because in a world that rewards sound bites, the trades deserve depth, and depth takes time. Robert, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. Thanks for making the trip from LA.
Andrew, this is great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So before we jump in, tell us a little bit about you and about Pacific.
Yeah, well, again, my name is Robert Pelletier. Pacific Hardwood is a fairly large manufacturer of custom wood products. We specialize in flooring. It's about 80% engineered, 20% solid. We also do moldings, architectural panels, staircases, etc. I'm actually from upstate New York originally, so I've bounced around the country in the corporate world for about 16 years before I ended up having my own business. So what I've tried to do is bring some of the larger big business corporate structures into an industry that lacks that in a lot of ways, and scale custom in a way that I don't think has been done before.
Yeah, very, very cool. Well, again, thanks for being here, and glad to have you. And sorry that the weather isn't as good as where you're from.
Well, we had fun last night.
Yeah. Hey, it's a little taste of the South. Little taste of the South. So, long-term thinking. Our industry, we build products that are built to last. When we contemplate thinking about how we do business and conversations we have, let's just talk about the long-term thinking behind that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, long-term is I'm in the relationship business, right? So a lot of operators, I think, are very transactional. So they look at, okay, how can I get this sale in my hand? And how do I move on to the next transaction? And I think if you're going to be successful in this industry, playing the long game, as you mentioned, is super important, and building those intimate relationships up and down your supply chain, both with your vendors and with your customers, et cetera, is critical. And I think there's also some demographic issues that offer opportunities for folks like us as the industry kind of ages out. There's not a lot of young people coming in that are excited about wood products in particular, right? So looking at how we can partner with folks who are like-minded in the education side of thing, and understanding specifications and the materials that we use and the processes, et cetera, and develop that, not just customer intimacy, but with the employees, with the vendors, et cetera. You see that compound over years, and you build those relationships, and then you build a business.
Yeah, I love that. When you meet somebody new, I mean, you mentioned vendors, clients, staff, team, other peers in the industry. What is there a question that you ask to try to get to kind of the essence? We talk about transaction. How do you discern that? Where do you find that kind of sweet spot to cut to really to get somewhere where there's a little bit more depth?
Yeah. So we just came back from Surfaces, right? That's an industry trade show that we have every year. And when we meet new people, what I try to do is understand, what is the problem they're having? What problem can I solve, right? Because anybody can stand there and say, oh yeah, we make wood flooring and give them the ABCs that if anybody's been doing this for any length of time, they already know, but I want to understand what their pain point is. So that creates more of an in-depth conversation where they open up, because people like to talk about their pain and their issues in any area of life.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
So if you're willing to listen and really...
We're in Nashville. It's what country music is built on.
Yeah, 100%. That's good. Yeah. So I really try to look at what problem of yours can my company or myself potentially solve. And I think that gets into a deep conversation very quick versus the superficial.
Your past experience, you were an executive in the corporate world. What similarities do you see in our industry? I know they're very different. There's a lot more small business in in construction in general. There's a lot of entrepreneurs.
Sure.
But what were you able to carry over aside from, business skills that
Sure.
maybe you acquired? What were some of the things that you learned along your journey that helped you succeed in this industry?
Yeah, well, being a manufacturer, so I have about a 3.5 acre factory in Southern California. I spent a lot of time in lean manufacturing. So I had the opportunity to go work in Japan when I was younger, when I was working for Acuity Brands, which did specialty chemicals and lighting, et cetera.
Yeah, cool.
So, what we've figured out how to do is do custom at scale, right? So a lot of factories are set up to make one product. There's one locally near me. It makes 7.5 inch white oak that's 6 feet long, and they can crank out, tens of thousands of square feet a day, but they don't set up for anything else. So using those lean manufacturing techniques that I learned over 15 years, I spent about 7 years in the cabinet industry before flooring. So I worked for RSI Home Products, which was the world's largest cabinet company at the time. So figuring out how to go from making something where we're making 140,000 cabinets a day to making a wood floor, but the process is the same. How do I establish one piece flow? How do I speed up my changeovers? How do I make sure that the quality of each piece is exactly what it needs to be in the custom world? Because, in this business, I always feel there's 3 problems that everybody wants to have solved: speed, ease, and risk, right? So how can I be the fastest, the easiest, and the least risky to work with? And a lot of that comes down to the manufacturing operation and making sure that we can have short lead times, even if we're running 6 different completely products a day.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. So that brings us to kind of today's topic. You mentioned Japan. You've had a lot of study. You've had a lot of exposure. We both podcast.
Yeah.
Why is that important in our industry?
Well, I think, digital marketing, I have 3 children, right? So I have soon to be 17-year-old, 15-year-old, and 13-year-old. And I always tell them that, a lot of people say it's the hardest time in the world for a young person to kind of find their way. And I would argue maybe. So I pull out a phone and I say, this is either your biggest asset or your biggest distraction, right? But the ability to use YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, et cetera, the world's at your oyster, and it's basically free, right? So I think it's critical for any business owner. Money follows attention. And now, we couldn't do this 15 years ago.
No.
It would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. You'd be spending millions of dollars on ads. Now if you're disciplined and you're consistent, you have these tools that you can use to market yourself and really not just market. I mean, what we try to do is also educate, and that creates trust, right? Between the people that we buy from and sell to, is how do we use particularly long form content to drive education and value. So it's not just self-promotion and, hey, come buy something.
Yeah.
How can we understand your problems and try to deliver content that drives value to them?
Who are your favorite long-form conversation podcasts, whether it's in this industry or not?
Yeah, I listen to a lot of motivational stuff, but not really industry. So I just got back from working with Alex Hormozi, for instance, in Vegas about a month ago. I spent 2 days there with him, and a couple things like really just transformed my thinking around business. I listen to Dan Martell quite a bit. I used to listen to like Patrick Bet-David. We did both of Grant Cardone's homes, for instance. So I listened to him. So a lot of kind of
he has a lot to say.
Motivate. Oh, he definitely does. Doesn't necessarily follow everything he says.
He has a lot to say.
Certainly no shortage of words. So I enjoy that type of content.
So share with me, you just got back from Vegas. What did you learn in this conference? I mean, you said two things that kind of reshaped what you thought. What did you learn and how have you applied it?
Yeah, so it's theory of constraints, which I learned in school. I felt kind of dumb that I wasn't following it in my own business. So I've spent the last 3 years dumping millions of dollars into my factory. My factory runs about 9 hours a day, 5 or 6 days a week. So if you look at 24/7, 365, I'm only running the factory like 28% of the time, but I'm spending a lot of my time, money, and attention on how to wring out every drop of efficiency in the factory. Meanwhile, we have tons of leads because we've done a lot of this digital marketing, right? But I don't have enough salespeople and the technology on the sales side to convert leads into orders. So just that concept of, well, why are you doing anything over here in the factory? It's not the constraint in your business. What's stopping you from being a 9-figure business? You've got all these leads, you need to convert them. What if you spent that $2 million on sales, infrastructure, technology, and make the factory the constraint? Right? That was the biggest takeaway. And then the second thing I would say is that simplicity of what I mentioned maybe 5 minutes ago about, speed, ease, and elimination of risk, with speed being number one. I really feel, particularly in our industry, making custom products, if you can, and fast doesn't mean you're cutting corners.
No.
It just means that you're able to be very flexible and deliver value to customers in a way they're not used to, where they're like, oh, I thought that would take 12 to 16 weeks. And I could say, no, I can give you a custom pre-finished product in 5 weeks. And they're like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it makes their life easier.
Yeah. It's a solution. I mean, it's all about being a solution. What shocked you most about stepping away from bigger businesses that had bigger resources into small business and specifically into the kind of the construction industry?
Human capital. So when I left RSI, I had 5,000 people, right? So I had layers of organizations, and it took me 17 years to work into that. But I always had people that I could either go to from like a mentor or here's where I'm trying to get to standpoint, or really talented people under me, where even if there was a weak player on the team, there was still a team, right? And now I'm running a business and I'm wearing 15 different hats. And I thought, okay, well, I can work with that person. I'll scale them up and do this and do that. And the human capital side was a lot harder than I thought it would be. So I know we both are in EO, for instance. So a couple years into buying the business, I realized I can't be the sharpest pencil in the barrel. And I got to start getting around some people who are having similar challenges to me and figure out how I can scale a small business, because scaling a small business is a lot different than dealing with a huge corporate conglomerate.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it always makes me wonder how did those businesses scale? Like it's fascinating when you look at a case study and between a capital standpoint and and human capital, it's like how did they do it? And how do we do it? And I think one of the you touched on it earlier, education. In my experience, the switch that we've seen since COVID is a lot of people do want to step into craft and creating and the physical, product building, design. I often talk about on this podcast how our lived environment is changing so fast that interior design is such a bigger industry now than it was 10 years ago. And pretty much everywhere we go is touched by it, especially if it's new. What do you think from you mentioned our kids and as they get older, have access to information. Where do you think the market is going to go in our industry? Like, is it going to continue to evolve? We're in an age of super fast information, design, materials. What's kind of your perspective on the future?
With the kids, it's exciting and scary, right? Because, when I was young, it was pretty much the old school path of get good grades, go to college, get a job, work your way up, figure out if you do your own thing at some point, et cetera. And now with kids, you either have people that everybody thinks they're going to be a social media influencer, right, and a YouTube star, or I see a lot of kids that are aimless. So what I found really exciting, I'll share a story real quick if you don't mind. We had a open house with my son's high school at our factory about 2 months ago. So they have a business academy there. So we had 115 kids come through in groups of 5. So that was somewhat manageable. And it was interesting because you'd watch, and I was explaining again about the phone being either the biggest asset or the biggest distraction. And once one kid started asking some questions, the other felt more comfortable asking. And there was a subset of, I would say, about 15% of the kids that were very interested in what you're talking about. I mean, they're looking at each of the machines and like, well, how does this actually work? And what goes on over here? And you could tell they were geeking out on the transformation of product, right? And then some of them stayed after. Some of them asked me if they could give me their email address. And I conversed with them and like internships and things. I think for young people, especially with this AI transformation, we're in a very dynamic state right now, where it's not, a lot of these white collar jobs are just, frankly, they're not going to exist. Now, everybody always says that technology is going to be the end of the world, whether it was the Industrial Revolution or the internet came. I believe the AI will create a lot of opportunities and industries that we can't even fathom. Yeah. So I don't think the end of the world is coming, but I do think like you're not going to need a paralegal or a medical transcriptionist or a lot of that's going to go away. So the challenge is it's like everything, like we talked earlier about what's the problem to solve. We have a trades problem in this country, and it's a big one, right? I mean, I don't know your market intimately. It's my first time here, and
No, we have a big issue.
I'm super happy to have been able to come here and check it out. But I mean, in Southern California, I can't find people. And then when I'm talking to my installers and contractors, they're worried because a lot of these guys are in their 40s and 50s. They're not going to keep doing this for much longer and getting that next generation in. But it's a huge opportunity. I just don't think that young people really understand the opportunity in front of them. Like if I was young and I wanted to work with my hands, I'd go get an electrical degree right now. I mean, there's such a shortage of electricians. My maintenance guy,
it's a great trade.
Yeah,
that and masonry, like the two most respected trades.
Yeah. Like my maintenance guy, who's an electrician, he's my highest paid employee.
Yeah.
Right. And I would never want to lose him. You know, he does a great job. There's just so many opportunities. I don't think we as a society do a very good job articulating to young people really paths that they can really succeed at in the future. I'm not sure that answered your question.
No, it does. It does totally. And again, I think that there's a return to craft. You know, one thing, the Great Recession killed off a generation of people in this industry. Okay. And we just similarly saw that repeat itself with hospitality with COVID. So people that were in that career, we're just now starting to see people have enough experience that were able to get back into this industry in 2014, 2015, to where they have the skill level requisite for, to be considered a craftsman.
Hey, let me ask you a question. In your market, how are these people developed? How are they found? How do the young people know where to go?
So it's still very much family driven.
Yeah. Generational businesses.
It's generational. I believe that certain people like certain things. So, I have twins. Okay. One of them is never going to, she loves art. That's what she wants to do. It doesn't matter anything else. That's what she's going to do. And I have seen, you really have to be passionate in this business to rise to a level that, you're really considered a craftsman, where you're respected, where it matters, where you have authority to be able to implement the products that we manufacture and design. So the talent pool, it used to be shop. There's academies down in Charleston where you just visited. There's the American College of Building Arts. That is a 4-year degree. But the kind of the thread is there is a passion for working with material, doing something with your hands, learning a skill. I'm with you. When I grew up, it was that traditional path. You had, if you didn't go to college, you weren't going to, you were going to be flipping burgers the rest of your life.
I remember that exact sentence.
And
I started out flipping burgers.
Me too. But the fact of the matter is none of us know what the next 5, 10, 15 years is going to mean from a job perspective. Yeah. And again, that's where I think these long form conversations about the industry can be very, very impactful. I'm no technology expert, but I don't think robots are going to be able to build homes in the next 10 years.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. They may be able to assist. There may be robots that can deliver material to a job site. There may be things like that. But as far as building and designing, in the implementation, I feel like that's probably a safe field. And for people wanting a rewarding career that is high paying, this is a great industry. 100%. And on top of that, you have a lot of autonomy. This industry is really made up of just a ton of small businesses, which to me is, again, kind of that common thread that we see with young people. The phone, being an influencer, it's that they get to call their own shot.
Yeah.
So this drive to entrepreneurship, I think the building industry makes a ton of sense for people that are wired like that. Now you have to learn a skill, and that's, it's what's that old saying that the lesson comes after a lot of failure.
Sure.
And it's hard to learn these skills, and it's demanding, and there's a lot of money at stake, and it's a results driven business. The only impression that matters is the final one. But I can see that evolution here in Nashville and across the South. There is just different tiers of craftsmanship.
Sure.
And at the level my company works in, we get to work with a lot of very, very talented people. But there's a lot of first generation Americans that make up the workforce. And we have crews that we've partnered with that we've seen them grow just like us over the last 10 years, where their skill level was less than it is now 10 years ago.
Sure.
And you see their kids getting into it.
I think it's kind of like sports, right? So my son is very into basketball, and you can see the kids that they call it stacking days, right?
That's right.
You stack days, and you don't see a difference from day to day, or even week to week, or sometimes month to month. But if you look at a year to year or a 5-year window or whatever, you build these skills, and to your point, there's a lot of different segments in the market, right? And there's nothing stopping someone from, if they're disciplined enough and they're passionate enough, as you said, from starting, in maybe a lower level of construction, et cetera, but stacking those days, building those relationships. And I think relationships are super important. It amazes me. Something you said really struck me too a minute ago. There's so many small businesses in this industry. And I tell the sales team this all the time. You have no idea how many potential customers there are there. You can go on an Instagram page, like we do a lot on Instagram. Someone will follow us, and then I'll go look at them, and I'll see who's following them, and I instantly find like 40 more flooring companies. There's tens of thousands and thousands, and there's just so much opportunity out there. You get so excited, and you want to build those relationships with people that are like-minded.
Like-mindedness, I think, is exactly the key. That's what attracts people to one another, the standard, the like-mindedness. Switching gears just slightly, but what led you to hardwood flooring? I mean, it's just kind of interesting. What was that decision process like?
It was really a big failure in my life, to be honest.
Okay.
So, I won't bore you with my whole backdrop, but I grew up in a very small town in upstate New York. My mom waited tables. My dad was a plumber. I was very, very motivated. So I was always pretty entrepreneurial as a kid, but I wasn't exposed to really entrepreneurism. It was that traditional, you're going to go to college, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. So I went to Rochester, I got an engineering degree, and then I went to work for Unilever, which was making home and personal care products. They basically make everything Procter & Gamble doesn't. I worked there for a couple years, and we were launching Axe body spray. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but it was pretty nasty stuff, but it was popular. So
every 16-year-old boy in the world just drenched themselves with that.
That's right. So I got to know the VP of the manufacturing facility that was going to be making that, and he recruited me away. So I was always very ambitious. So I moved from Connecticut to Rhode Island, which was not much of a move, but I went from New York to Connecticut to Rhode Island. I ran that, and then I got a phone call from a cold call, and they were interested in factories in Atlanta, and they were really embarking on this lean manufacturing journey that I mentioned earlier. So I had no interest in leaving. I really liked coastal Connecticut, but my best friend from college happened to live in Atlanta, and I hadn't seen him in almost 4 years. So to be honest, I looked at it as a free ride down to Atlanta to go have some fun and do a job interview. And when I got exposed to this lean manufacturing, it was fascinating to me, because a lot of companies say they're doing it, but they're not all in on it. This company was hiring the people that worked for Taiichi Ono, who founded the Toyota production system in Japan. And they were bringing over, these guys at $70,000 a week just to do consulting. So they were all into it. So I got the opportunity to get exposed to that at a very young age. And it gave me a big opportunity to run 5 factories in my mid-20s. So that was a unique opportunity, but really boosted my career. I got to skip some steps as a result of that education. I was going to school full-time at Emory as well. So that was a grind. So those were 100-hour weeks, literally. But I thought when I was done with that, I was going to move back to New York and work in finance. But during my business school, we worked in teams a lot, and I got to meet people who were already doing that. And I realized pretty quickly that wasn't for me. I like working with my hands. I like working with people. And I like being able to really see the output of my work, not just numbers on a spreadsheet. So when I finished business school, I got recruited by RSI Home Products, which was the cabinet company I told you about. And that was fantastic. So I got to do 6 jobs in 7 years.
Wow.
And I worked my way up to the SVP of Global Ops. So I was running 7 factories around the world.
Wow.
And it was fantastic professionally, but personally, I really was kind of losing myself. So I got full of myself. I was in my early 30s. You know, I'm on private jets and I'm in these different 5-star hotels and I have expense accounts and I can do whatever I want. I'm like the hot shot, right? And I lost a little bit of my character along that way. And I made some poor decisions and my habits were kind of getting bad and I had children along the way. And I really was going to lose my family as a result of just my choices and my behaviors and where I was at in life. And so I had to step away from that. And that was really scary because I found myself unemployed, you know, with 3 little kids. I think my kids were 4, 3, and 1 at the time.
Wow.
And I'm living in Southern California. I had no idea what I was going to do. So I started a consulting company the very next day after I left RSI. And I started getting clients. So I did a promotion products company, a food company, a fashion company. I actually saw one of their stores here in Charleston.
Oh, cool.
It's called Reformation.
Oh, cool.
It was kind of cool to see it.
Yeah.
They've expanded a lot. And my 4th client was Pacific Hardwood.
Yeah.
So the previous owner had built a really good foundation, but he was at a stage in life where he was kind of over the business. And I was looking for an entrance and he was looking for an exit. I don't really think cabinetry translated over to flooring at all. Like the wood space wasn't really the thing. But I saw this factory that was 8 miles from my house where I could be with my kids and I could kind of refine the factory in my sleep because that's what I had done for 20 years.
This is
So I saw this
small potatoes compared to what you had done.
I saw this low-hanging fruit. So I went in and just started tweaking it and playing with it. And then I had to really teach myself kind of sales and marketing. I didn't really have any experience in that. But I really realized I loved it. I actually enjoy the sales and marketing side of the business more than the ops side.
Yeah.
My mother was like a consummate salesperson. So I think there's a genetic thing that
waited tables. I mean, that is frontline sales. That is frontline sales.
She also had her own little interior design business, but believe it or not, back in the 80s. But I really kind of just fell into it. There wasn't a plan to do it. I'm not really focused on a particular product. It's really more about I like building things. So building people, building systems, building factories, building relationships. It wouldn't really matter to me if it was wood or marble or widgets or it's that I really get very passionate about people, processes, and systems.
Dude, that's really cool. That's really cool. You have a great story. But let's talk about product real fast because it is what we both do. And, you know, you obviously have an engineering degree. So working with things has always been, and problem solving has always been kind of near and dear to your heart. We build things that are meant to last and to bring a lot of joy. Talk about kind of the correlation between the sales and marketing and then the manufacturing. How do you bridge those things? And, you know, and we can make this applicable to just the industry, but making sure those two things are in sync. You know, just share with me from your perspective of leading an organization that really at the end of the day, that's where the rubber meets the road. You've got to build pretty things to have the relationship, and it's a circle. So just kind of walk me through what you had to learn to be able to do that.
I love that question. It makes me think a lot. I think the main thing for us is making sure that we are focusing on our target market. We're not trying to be all things to all people, right? When you look at flooring products, for instance, you've had LVT and SPC, and then you've got a lot of Vietnamese products that come in, et cetera. You know, in a zest to scale a business at first, when I came from the corporate world, is okay, how do I scale this? And you kind of can get shiny object syndrome to say, well, what if we built that on and that on? And I to your first point of the long game, I've gotten that out of my head, right? So we manufacture very high-end products. I kind of call it the Ferrari of flooring, right? And what's very important for us in how we go to market with our sales and our marketing and training our sales team and the types of relationships we want to invest in, like taking time to, thank you for the invite, to go to Charleston and to Nashville and to get to know you guys very intimately and see that correlation between, we both have the same vision of the type of customer we're looking to serve, the products that we want to produce, et cetera. You know, they always say there's riches and niches, right? So wrapping my head around, okay, a niche business can still scale quite a bit, right? If you look at what's the addressable market for flooring, it's billions and billions of dollars, right? I can have a $100 million business making very high-end product by focusing on developing that customer intimacy, supplier intimacy, and making sure that all of our sales, marketing, and training goes around not getting distracted from what we're selling. We're not, I'm a car guy, right? So I say constantly, there's nothing wrong with a Kia, but I say, we're not selling Kias. Right? We're selling at least Mercedes, or we're selling Bentleys or whatever. And so I don't want to get distracted with that. I want to stay focused on putting our time, effort, money, and emotional input into finding the right folks to partner with.
So in building that, what has been your key to success for getting that to flow downstream to your team?
To the internal team?
Yep.
We work together very, very closely. Like one of my best sales guys is standing right over there. Like he's with me, right? So, every day we're looking at deals, we're evaluating customers. I have built up a marketing group. So I have a full-time woman in the office. We do a lot of technology. So we're using Zoom Info, we're using HubSpot. We've been doing, I didn't realize you had done a couple hundred of these podcasts already. I mean, you're very early to the game there. That's impressive. We're very big on social media and digital marketing, and we learn a lot there too. When we post and we see comments or we get outreach from folks, you don't want to ever think you know everything. So learning from the people that reach out to you, and then having those conversations to say, what problem can we solve from you? Or, oh, wow, we didn't even know. I learned about products that I didn't even know about from customers that reach out to us that we can make. Right? I just hadn't been exposed to it yet. So once we get that information, then it's just having a very intimate team at work where we're, as I mentioned, I didn't grow up with much, right? So we weren't poor, but it was very humble.
Yeah, middle
right?
class. Yep.
So I try to treat my business like a family. And I pay for all their health insurance. I have a profit sharing plan. We have picnics every holiday. And I try to really get to know the employees at a friendly level as much as I can, and make sure that everybody's kind of in the boat rowing together. So I think it's just communication, and then education, not just us educating our customers, but our customers educating us as well.
Man, that's a really valid point. I have learned more from asking questions and somebody, sharing their vision than anything else.
Yeah,
It is such a way to broaden horizons, is listening to other people's imagination or curiosity, especially when they're approaching us who should be experts in our field. So I would highly recommend to any of our listeners that if you're stepping into this industry, be curious and listen.
Yeah, like spending time with Scott yesterday in Charleston in your showroom was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was very educational.
Yeah.
Looking through like your vision for your programs and how you want to revolutionize kind of go-to-market strategies there. And then we got the privilege of touring some of the islands, out there and looking at the different architecture and the builds that have happened, et cetera. We're in California. The California aesthetic is totally different from your key aesthetic, right?
That's right.
So when I look at a character grade rift and quartered white oak, if I couldn't sell that in California, right? But out here, nobody wants what I'm making in California. They don't want clear grade rift oak with not a knot in it, right?
Yeah.
So understanding these different markets, and I think it's like anything else in life. The more you broaden your horizons, the more you realize you're really only this big, right? Even as a human being. Yeah. I remember the first time I got to go in an airplane where I could look out the cockpit, and we're landing and we're coming into LA, and you can just see the city, and you're humbled. You realize you're so insignificant. You're this tiny little speck, right?
Yeah, we're just a little cog.
So those kind of little moments of knowing that we'll learn so much over the next year. Yeah. And we'll be in a totally different spot 12 months from now in terms of how we can service our customers. But that's only because we have to be inquisitive.
That's right. One of the valuable, I think, lessons that you learn in business, and it's a hard one, is how to say no. And I think that that really is central to the long game. And I look back at my career, and the first 10 years, it was, we need sheet vinyl for an outhouse. I can do that. I got that. I can do that. And still, for like some people, we would still do that because it's just a service we provide. But share some experience about stepping into a relatively new industry, and maybe some of the discipline that you had to exercise, and the ability to say no. Because I feel like that's really an acquired, learned behavior.
I would tell you, up until very recently, I was terrible at that. So when I took over my business, it was around a $6-7 million business, and now we're at about a $31 million run rate. right? And some of that is because I didn't say no, right? So some good came out of that.
Yep.
But there's a lot of pain that came with that. And as the business scaled to a point where I just couldn't physically do it anymore because it would compromise key relationships. It would mess up lead times, et cetera. But I was horrible about that until recently. The other lesson I had to learn is to really value what we bring to the market, right? So in my zest to build and scale again, it would be saying yes to things and not really charging what I think we should have been charging, because I had a little anxiety around, I got to keep building. I've got this big factory that I'm running 9 hours a day and I want to feed it 16 hours a day. And I have all this overhead, and manufacturing in Southern California is very difficult between taxes and regulation and insurance. So learning how to say no really for me has only happened in the last 18 months, probably. Because as an employee, when I'm in the corporate world, I was always say yes, right? Who wants to do this? Yep, me. And I was always rewarded for that, right? Okay, and promotion. When you're running a business, you can really get yourself in a lot of trouble if you're just saying yes to everything and you're not really looking at, does this fit our core values? Is this the market we want to be in? Are these the type of people that I want to be in business with, right? And am I going to be able to be fairly compensated for what we're doing here? If like an example would be, we do a lot of rift oak now. It's probably 30% of our business. And frankly, I was giving that stuff away. I've learned very recently, okay, I started bumping it up $1 a square foot, then $2 a square foot, then $3 a square foot. Everybody's still happy. Having that confidence when it's different when you work for a corporation and you're not signing the front of the check. Okay, I have this salary and this bonus, and I just need to do my job and everything's going to be okay. It's a lot different when you're managing cash flow and employees and, issues that come up, and volatility in raw materials, and, rent just went up 30%. And so you can have a zest to say yes, but you're not doing yourself any favors if you do that too much. So that's an awesome point. And really, I just started getting decent at that 18 months ago. And I would argue it's probably still a little bit of a blind spot for me.
You mentioned kind of your decision-making matrix, and you started with, does this match our core values? As an owner and as a leader, how often are you contemplating that question?
With new relationships now, very much so, right? So I've learned that it's better to have 150 customers that we really connect with, that really line up with us like this, than to try to have 1,000 customers where I'm trying to be all things to all people. Because if we can get that intimacy with our customer, and we can learn, like again, mentioning with Scott yesterday, we're going to tour Nashville today. As we get to learn each other's businesses and capabilities, I would prefer to not be in the sales business, to be honest. I'm a manufacturer, right? So what I'm trying to find is strategic partnerships in different parts of the country where those values line up, and I can do what we're set up to do and good at, which is manufacture flooring at the highest level possible and bring speed, ease, and elimination of risk to the market. And folks like yourself who are excellent at sales, marketing, brand building, and being out there, really knowing your market. Like, I don't know Nashville. It's my first time here. So why do I want to focus on learning the whole Nashville market? You already know the whole A's, B's, ups and downs. I'm learning the value of those relationships and understanding how important that relationship is versus, like we talked about at the beginning, let me get another transaction. Right? Anybody can go get a transaction, but then you're just constantly on a treadmill, transaction. That's it. Versus building some verticals with people.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. What do you do to attract new talent?
Customers or talent?
Team members.
Very, very difficult in Southern California, especially. We've actually started outsourcing some of those roles. So I'm an EO like you are. So I've got a fractional AI marketing guy. I've got a fractional scaling person. I've got some salespeople and marketing people that work in South Africa. So they have like Australian or London accents. They work well with customers, et cetera. And then in the factory, we're really going traditional routes where we're working with recruiting agencies, et cetera.
Okay.
But what I've tried to do is leverage EO and business organizations to look at, how do I fractionally bolt things on? And then as the business scales, I think we'll build relationships with those folks. And then we can pull from that when we need a full-time CFO or full-time this or full-time that.
What, when you are meeting with peers, and EO is a great example of that, are you often surprised, or that's probably a little bit leading, how surprised are you at the commonality between all business?
the commonality I really find is in the value system, right? So in my chapter, it's like, I remember when I went to, I got email from EO for like 6 months, come to a happy hour.
Yeah.
I'm like, delete.
Yeah.
Finally, I had nothing to do.
Same thing. Yeah.
I had nothing to do on a Friday, so I'm like, I'll go.
I thought it was like a networking group. You know, it's like, keep going.
No,
Sorry.
Exactly. So I went to the happy hour and I'm like, wow, this is cool. Like, I feel
these are
a
my
lot
people.
of commonality here quickly. And then I went to the, where we had to get screened, right? And then they vote and all that stuff. And I called my wife after and I said, this is like breathing oxygen. I've missed this for like 5 years since I left the corporate world. And I said, this is just amazing, right? So what surprised me so much is, it doesn't matter what business you're in. We're all dealing with a lot of the same struggles, right? Feeling alone, trying to figure out how to do things we don't know how to do.
Support group.
And then it's been tremendously valuable to me on the personal side. So not just the business side, but also other people who are dealing with parenting issues, marriage issues, personal development
Aging
issues,
parents, whatever. Yeah, I mean,
midlife crises issues, et cetera. You don't feel like you're alone in the boat, and that could be a real injection of confidence, courage, and adrenaline to really kind of push forward.
Well, it's funny because Nashville is actually the largest EO chapter in the country. And
how many members do you have?
Right under 400.
Oh, wow.
And so there are literally, there's about 52 events a year here. So an event a week. And this is very much an entrepreneur's community with music and healthcare and, any industry you can think of. But it is so interesting because of the crossover you find between businesses, regardless of industry. So in my forum, I often talk about, he's turned out to be one of my very best friends. He's a facial plastic surgeon. And very early on, we could literally, like, number 1 through 8 of issues in our business were identical. Whether it was, supply chain, client, etc. And it was 1 through 8. He's a facial plastic surgeon, and I'm
completely different.
And I'm in the flooring industry, and they were identical issues. And I think that's one thing that really, helped me understand was, there is just this incredible similarity in business. Regardless of what you do, it's pretty much all the same. And a lot of other people have experienced it. And you don't have to have an ego. Like, there's not one business that's better than the other. I mean, look at waste management. A bunch of garbage. Great business.
There's a lot of money in concrete, right?
a lot of money in all of this stuff. So it's just been fascinating to, really kind of appreciate community and just the lessons that are learned through the experience shares that you get. And that, again, is one of the reasons for these long form conversations. For folks that don't have the ability to be an EO or another professional organization, that's what a lot of, this long game is about. It's about collecting wisdom and trying to understand the lessons before you have a big failure. And I just find that really valuable within our industry. I've got a couple more questions for you, but one is in particular to our products. They are forest products. And I know a lot of your suppliers are old school, generational businesses in the Appalachians. Just share what those relationships are. If there's kind of a spectrum of, a forestry company that's maybe been in a family for 80 years, stepping into trying to build a relationship with that as opposed to a broker, because, sourcing, I think, is probably one of the harder things to do.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And
especially during COVID.
Yeah. And it's just like, how do you build and maintain those relationships being new to the industry?
Yeah.
Just maybe some challenges around that.
Well, I had to learn to slow down and shut up. So I'm a fast talking guy from New York, right? So I when I first came into the industry, I was realizing I was being abrasive to some of these lumber mills on the East Coast without trying to be at all. I like to think I'm very friendly and congenial, but I'm in here talking a mile a minute, and I'm focused on metrics and costs and everything. And they're like,
I need to know you.
Right? Yeah. So that relationship had to be built. That's why I've mentioned supplier relationships a lot here. So, having a different temperament, personality, realizing that I'm not just buying a box of screws, right? I am buying from a generational person who might be the grandson of the person who started the company, and they're in rural Tennessee, and their pace of life is totally different than mine, and starting to connect with them and find some common points where we can connect human to human. And then, secondarily to that, it's doing really good business. So the previous owner had a saying, he said, fast pay makes fast friends, right? So my goal was always, I pay them within 10 days. So they know that there's no jerking around going on. And when you deal with Pacific Hardwood, you're going to get paid, right? So that was a common theme, regardless of whether it's a lumber generational
fast pay, fast friends. Yeah.
So just, connecting personally. And then, we try to do favors too. We've had issues where a mill would ask, can we store some stuff at your site for a couple of weeks? We need to redirect it somewhere else. Not just making it transactional again. Like we talked about trying to find customers is how do we find common values and common things to connect on and build that relationship where it's not just the transaction. And then learning to say no to some vendors too, right? So my lumber supply base is vastly different than it was 6 years ago. I've partnered with 3 or 4 that I really trust that are in a certain part of the country where the wood has the grain patterns I'm looking for, the color consistency I'm looking for. And they know me and I know them personally. And I know that when I buy something, I'm going to get what I ordered and they know they're going to get paid right away.
What, was there some lessons in getting to that point?
Yeah. So like oak would be a good one because I didn't grow up in forestry. So as we started to move from Appalachian oak to Northern oak, and then as we started to go from just not doing unfinished to custom pre-finishing, you realize these are really different trees. You can call them white oak trees, but the species is so different. So there was some pain there, and I'd run 5,000 feet of something and then send it down the finishing line, and it ends up looking like a rainbow when it comes out the other end, right? And I'm like, what's going on here? So we've pivoted to domestically, I only buy true Northern white oak. So I'm in Northern Michigan, Northern Wisconsin, upstate New York, parts of Pennsylvania, and that I can get the consistency that I need. But these are things you stub your toe on along the way when I'm not a generational lumber guy. Right. So
very, very cool. Where do you see our industry going?
I think that the high end is going to continue to do well. Just coming out of surfaces, just some feedback for anyone who's interested that might be listening to this. The middle of the market is really struggling. So I met with some banking groups that invest in building products companies, and they're all really, really struggling. The housing market's locked up in a lot of places. You guys have a lot of going on down here because people are migrating New York and California, and they're coming here, right? But like where I live, there's 300 and something houses in my neighborhood, and there's not one for sale because values have tripled, interest rates have more than doubled, and people just frankly can't afford to move.
Can't afford to leave.
So you're not seeing the remodeling and whatnot. But what I am seeing, at least with what we do, is a change, the square footage even. So I used to have a lot of 1,200 square foot, 1,700 square foot, 2,200 square foot jobs. Those are a very small, those used to be the bread and butter. Now they're a small subset, but I have a lot of 7,000, 9,000, 11,000, 5,500. And these are all wealthy people building. So I think, when you're talking about hardwood flooring, I think it's timeless. Hardwood flooring, I don't think is going anywhere, particularly on the high end. And I'm also starting to see even LVT start to lose its luster as people are realizing that, the top might be waterproof, but guess what? The subfloor is not. And the construction isn't great. And it's basically plastic, and there's health issues and garbage issues.
What do we do with it? And
So I think hardwood's always going to be here. I think for us, and I believe you as well, it's staying in that market that's very, very resilient versus I think there's a race to the bottom in hardwood flooring in a lot of cases. There's so many hardwood floors I can buy for $3 a square foot.
It's unbelievable.
Delivered. It's cheaper than I can make it by far.
Which will always blow my mind.
But what's the product? My customers don't want that product.
No, it is, I think developing the client, being able to share a compelling story, understanding vision, and treating people well and not like they're a commodity is kind of the secret sauce with all of this stuff. So
what are you seeing? I asked that question back to you. What do you see as the future?
So what I see as the future is actually really simple. One is more intentional design. So what I see is, especially here in the South, where we had, kind of like the 2010s were the McMansion era.
Yeah.
We're moving in this market and in Charleston and other southern markets that we're in to a much more intentional high-end design. We're seeing longer building cycles.
Yeah.
We're seeing better equipped teams, but we're seeing an end result that you can have a 5,500 square foot home that lives like an 8,500 square foot home because of intentionality.
Yeah.
And we continue to see the cost per square foot rise. It's very common in Nashville for, and it's been this way in Southern California and other tier 1 markets for a long time, but being north of that $1,000 per square foot build level. But it's been great because you're they're just more timeless homes.
Yeah.
Like they're built to stand time. So what I really see is that people are becoming more wealthy. People really put more of an emphasis on lived environment. And I think that's going to expand. I think wealth creation will hopefully continue to expand. And that intentional design is a byproduct of those things. And home is sanctuary. Seeing a lot of secondary homes, seeing a lot of migration to the South, from LA, Illinois, New York, and really just people love beautiful things. Yeah. The more, again, it's like a giant flywheel. The more we're exposed to it, the more people crave it. And it becomes aspirational. And in my experience, in this short time on this planet, aspiration, is kind of the key to everything.
Yeah.
People want what they want and they end up getting what they want. And nuance. I often, think about food, and if you can't tell.
I have a little of that myself.
Yeah. So, but, think back to 15, 20 years ago, or we can go back to LA, when Wolfgang Puck, started with Spago.
Yeah.
And the design that kind of food underwent from the time we were growing up in, New York or Atlanta or whatever. It used to be iceberg lettuce and this and that and everything. That's completely changed.
Sure.
I really feel very strongly that there's a parallel that has happened in design as well. And people want to know the story of their product. They want it to be individual to their taste. And I think we'll just continue to see the market grow and combine that with kind of a deterioration of service, of how it kind of used to be. When you can lean into that and get into it with our clients and help them tell their story, I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity there. So,
well, I love what you're saying there about one. I really have tired of this disposable society, right? Where Amazon shows up every day.
That's right.
It's a bunch of junk you don't need, right? It fills your house up with clutter, and it's just garbage, right? And when you talk about the timeless things that are going on here and intentional design, that's exciting to me because and you mentioned home being sanctuary too, right? I like some minimalism, right?
That's right.
Where there's not clutter there's design, it's intentional, it's nice, it's timeless.
You can breathe.
That's exciting to me. And the other thing I think social media has done is it exposes everybody to the world, good, bad, and ugly, right? But I only speaking for myself as a kid growing up in a little town in upstate New York, I saw one Ferrari my entire childhood. I still remember it was a black Testarossa driving down Central Ave, right? And now wherever you're at, you get exposed to the most wild things. You see Dubai, you see Singapore, you see see, luxury tours where people are flying drones through homes that we've had. And I'd like to think, as I mentioned earlier, I grew up very just aspirational. Even though I didn't have that worldview, I'd like to think that that's going to really motivate an entire generation of young people to say, if you're growing up in the Midwest in some small town, well, there's more out there than this, right? And it just expands your worldview. I think it's super exciting.
No, I think it's a giant flywheel, and it's experiential. So we see that in our day-to-day business. The more of an experience or a ceremony that can be created around what we do, the better it is. And it's not fake. It comes back to one of our early points. It's about passion. And people really love that. People crave story. And, it's one of those things when I first started really getting into flooring, French oak was really my big competitor. And I started talking about, we have Northern Appalachian oak, and that denotes a certain thing. And it's no different than, here Bear Creek Farms beef. There's just that kind of through line of being able to understand the heritage of something and the timelessness of what it is. Because at the end of the day, to your point, there's commodity out there. At the end, it is an inert commodity. That's the business we're in. Yeah. The story around it, though, and the care and, how we really create tribute to it is what our clients buy.
And I like intentional design too. It's like in our market, because we make custom products, we do a lot of 6 to 12 foot long rift oak in these contemporary homes. And you can show that story in both the photos and in verbiage to show, look how this lengthens the room. And to your point earlier about making that 5,000 square foot house feel like it's an 8,800 square foot house. We do these hemlock ceilings, that are 16 feet long. And it pulls your eye and it makes the room look 30% bigger than it actually is. And it's beautiful, and it's always going to be beautiful. The colors might change, but because it's wood, you can refinish
because it's organic.
Yeah.
So that's probably the biggest thing that I see is in high-end homes, drywall is not anything you see. It is stone, plaster, or wood. And this continued, and maybe this is, kind of us living in a digital world, being surrounded by organic material is, I really believe, a significant part of the future. So a lot of cool stuff going on. We have a whole lot to be excited about. A whole lot to be excited about. This has been a wonderful conversation. I'm going to hit you with a couple rapid fire questions. So we do this on every episode. So one skill you'd love to learn.
The skill I'm continuing learning is patience.
Yeah.
I'm better at it than I was 5 years ago, but if you ask my wife, I'm still terrible at it.
And you will be to the day you die, because I'm in the same boat. The most underrated skill in construction.
Creating intimacy.
I like that. I like that a lot. That's a good one. One word that defines good leadership.
Listening.
Great one. Yeah, fantastic,
hard
Robert.
One. As a business owner, that's hard.
That's really hard.
But I think it's the most important skill.
That's really, really hard. And it is
like just sitting here with you, keeping my mouth shut and listening. I've got 2 pages of notes in my head because I shut my mouth and listen.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. We tell our team the best meetings you can have are the ones where you barely did any talking. Yeah, it's like you've absolutely just got to listen.
2 ears, 1 mouth.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Conversations like this remind me why we started Couture Construction in the first place. This industry deserves depth. It deserves nuance. It deserves time. And if we're honest, the best projects are not built on fast answers. They're built on thoughtful questions. Next week on Couture Construction, we continue to explore the translation layer of our industry. We'll look at how regional identity, material choices, and long-term thinking shape luxury markets in unexpected ways. Thank you for joining us. If this episode resonated with you, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone in the trades who believes conversation still matters. This episode was produced by Cass Collective and Chelsea Rand. Until next time, keep cultivating creativity.